Hello, Paul. It is May 13th on my part of the planet, May 14th for you. We're recording a day earlier than normal because we got stuff going on this week. We have a
We
busy
do.
schedule, so we'll air this at our normal time. But to anybody listening or watching, we're talking to you from the past.
Or the future, depending on where you're listening to this.
True. Anyway, big week behind us.
Oh my God.
We've got kind of three distinct things we want to talk about. They give us heartburn across the board. I think I want to step away from it for a second. A mutual friend of ours posted recently online, there's a lot of bad going on in tech right now. Like, what are people doing to manage it? And I really liked a lot of the responses that I saw to this. And my response was similar to what I saw from a lot of other people is, yeah, there's a lot of not fun things happening in the cybersecurity world right now. And we all got to do what we can in our little corners. But the thing that keeps me motivated and positive is I talk to people every day who are committed to making it better. And that's a lot of what I heard in the comments was, find your tribe, take a step back from the computer, leave the machine alone for a little bit. Paul, what do you do when you're starting to feel a little overwhelmed by what's going on?
Last night I was stressed. This has been a shit week, and my 6-year-old came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, you want to play some chess?" And I said, "Do you mean chess?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Yes, let's play." And we had a hour-and-a-half game because they are learning. And so I was at my most stressful. I've got these presentations to get done for Melbourne B-sides and stuff like that. And man, it was just a perfect thing to just take me out of the zone. So there you go.
I love it. Well, let's get back in the zone and start with RubyGems.
Yep.
Yesterday, time is funny. It might be a flat circle. RubyGems had to disable the ability to sign up for a new account after hundreds of bots tried to push packages. We'll share the links in the show notes, but basically Ruby started out with saying it was a DDoS attack. I'm not sure if that framing is useful. It may or may not have actually been a DDoS attack, but the net outcome was they were overwhelmed with tons and tons. Like, I think they said 500 packages. Some of them did have malicious code in them. Yeah, Paul, what do you think about it?
Well, first, RubyGems, it's not a large registry. It's also not a small one, but 500 packages to me doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, NPM sees 500 malicious packages a day minimum. But it's still kind of cloudy what's going on here. So the DDoS part of it might be that some of these packages were doing things that DDoSed other services. And I've seen some data that supports this, but I haven't verified this. And then you have this other problem about, like trust and safety and onboarding. And like all of the platforms have this problem: GitHub, GitLab, NPM, PyPy, RubyGems. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to join your platform. But then, the consequence is that, if you make it too easy, you don't have these captchas and stuff like that, then bots can join. And, there you go. It's been a while since I made a RubyGems account, but last time I did, it was pretty easy.
Yeah, and I mean, you're still seeing that for a lot of the ecosystem. All of the ecosystem is, much of it was created to be very easy to sign up, reduce friction. Yep. Developers don't like friction. The marketing and salespeople don't like friction. The security people would like some friction. Yeah, tough balance. Okay, moving on from RubyGems. Something that happened literally right after we closed out last week's live stream was we found out about a ransomware attack on Canvas, which anybody with a kid or who's been in school has probably heard of Canvas. It's used as an online learning platform for schools. And this is an incredibly broad, impact attack. Fortunately, my son's school district doesn't seem to use Canvas. So as far as we know, we are not personally affected. But Paul, what I heard from you immediately was you guys are.
Yeah, we are. This hits very close to home for us. Actually, literally, in the sense that my kid's school uses this platform. So Canvas is a platform, LMS, learning management system platform, owned by a company in Salt Lake City called Instructure. And Instructure's got like 2014 employees, and they've got like 8 security people. So that's a pretty shit security to regular employee ratio, Instructure. So I'm pointing that out, but one of the other frustrations that I've had is that there's just no data about what happened, right? And part of that frustration, right, for me personally, is aimed both at the school and the Department of Education here locally, but also in the government officials and Instructure itself. None of that, they're not talking about what's happening here. So meanwhile, there's a bunch of data sitting in the bad guys' hands, which they keep threatening to. This is ShinyHunters, by the way. In ShinyHunters' hands, they keep threatening to release, and they've pushed back the dates a couple times because they think that somebody's going to pay them. But in the meantime, we're hearing nothing from Instructure or and I do know that there is data out there, there is threat intel out there, but people are hiding it and keeping it to themselves, and I just want to call that out. That's shit.
The impact here can be really terrible. I mean, this is access to potentially messages between students and other people. So you can start to paint a picture of who trusted adults are in a kid's life. My background, well before working in tech, I worked for the US government in passports, and this type of data could potentially make it easier to steal a child's identity. If you know enough about that child, you could start, trying to get legal documentation in that kid's name. There's a lot of things that this data can be used to do that's harmful to children, harmful to schools. So not a great incident response experience, right?
Nope. I guarantee there's going to be a class action lawsuit, in the US, if not other places. And, people are going to be held accountable. But to your point there a second ago, part of this has to do with the fact there's a lot of data in that around people in protective services and other things. There's a lot of legal protections around that. So this is going to get really gnarly really quickly.
All right, let's move on to our third and biggest topic, mini ShinyHunters. Biggest topic, mini ShinyHunters. Starting here, there's been some statements or speculation about the connection between mini ShinyHunters and the original ShinyHunters campaign in 2025. And nobody knows who was behind the 2025 campaign. We know lots of people in the industry. Nobody that we're connected with has a firm grip on who was behind that campaign. But I think we have some evidence around why we don't think it was Team PCP. So let's talk about some things we know about Team PCP. They love the spotlight. They love to take credit. They love to brag. And we saw none of that last year with ShinyHunters. So I think, those two things combined, it's unlikely they're connected. Now, why did they choose to name their campaign Mini ShinyHunters? We don't know. My theory here would be it's going to get more clicks if it has a familiar name. It's going to give people maybe a bit of an emotional reaction to the new campaign, because they'll remember, oh, ShinyHunters was awful. That was a bad experience for me. That was a bad experience for the industry. That's my theory.
Yeah, I mean, so if we go backwards, the Team PCP they've admitted that they've, this latest mini ShinyHunters thing is theirs. They're being very upfront about that. They also have never said that they're the original threat actors. And in fact, there was a interview that you and I were looking at before this, where either DMT or one of the other leaders of Team PCP was interviewed and was talking about some of their kind of TTPs, and they pivoted really, really dramatically in early 2026. And I think people have forgotten that. Like this was not in their wheelhouse beforehand, right? And this is something net new, and they're progressing really quickly. And so in this interview, I'm looking at it right now, the interviewee admits that they're basically being mentored by somebody else that has more specific knowledge around GitHub Actions and cache poisoning and some of these things. And so, which is where the kind of the sexy part of this is there. I made a post yesterday and somebody was like, well, the source code for the worm. Oh, this is the other thing. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. The worm code is out there. But anyhow, they said, hey, there's nothing really special about the source code. And I said, that's not the point. You can't ignore the fact that this cache poisoning to package ecosystem workflow they've got is very successful, right? And you don't understand it, right? So the attribution by certain researchers to the original ShinyHunters, there's no evidence to support that at all. This latest one is Team PCP effectively copying or regurgitating other methodologies, TTPs.
Yeah, so to rewind back the clock a little bit, Mini ShinyHunters got launched around April 30th or so. We saw them compromise for SAP packages. That was something we talked about, I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago at this point on the show. It was successful, but not enormously successful. Then it was quiet for a week or 10 days or so. And we took a breath. We talked about other things. And then they compromised TanStack. And the TanStack compromise is a little different than what they did with SIP. It's different from the things that they did back in March with, Trivy and Aqua and Light LLM. The TanStack compromise has been very successful for them. It also is an NPM worm. It has compromised, maybe 90 plus packages, either directly through TanStack or through other account takeovers. There's some kind of interesting things going on with this next wave. And like you said earlier, some people are calling it wave 6. I don't know that calling it wave 6 is helpful. We'll say it's, the mid-May attack. So I've got some notes on some interesting things in no particular order. The first is that the way they got into TanStack was through a GitHub Actions vulnerability. And this is something that we've been seeing this spring. I think it might be the third time that we've seen it in a major account takeover attack. And they're evolving, they're learning about how to be more effective in getting into a maintainer's account. We saw a lot of social engineering last year. This year is trending more toward exploiting some kind of existing vulnerability to get a token or whatnot. So let's pause there. Anything you have to say, Paul, about the way that they're compromising lately?
Well, yeah, it's evolved quickly, and it's pretty technical. Basically, this is all based on Adnan Khan's 2024 cache poisoning technique, and he and Ronnie Carta have been doing every year. I saw him at DEF CON last year where they're dropping some new research, and they're going to do it again this year. I've already been given the heads up. But yeah, basically it gets really technical, and we're not going to go into the details here because some of it is even confusing for me. But basically the what it allows you to do is it allows you to create a commit and a PR that then automatically kind of kicks off. The PR doesn't have to be accepted. You're just creating a PR, and then these kind of actions take place. And then it uses this kind of unique cache poisoning trick. Now, what's special about this one is that it didn't use long-lived credentials. It didn't take advantage of PATS, personal access tokens. This is this is assigned. It uses OIDC. It's the way that you're supposed to do it, right? It's like salsa.
Yeah, we've been talking last, 6 months or so about how things like trusted publishing, would be helpful because it's all going to be signed and you're going to see the attestation. Well, they did attestation. So they're hearing the message.
Yeah. All that does is it guarantees that there's a pipeline from the GitHub, repository to the artifact that it generates. And so, doesn't, if a bad guy gets in the process, which is what happened here. And so I think, like every time we talk about one of these simplistic things, like, not installing packages right away and all these things, these are all great things to do, but in depth. None of these things should be singular. And the problem is I hear a lot of people focusing on, attestation and all these kind of things as singular pursuits that fix everything. And that's just not the case. And I know you and I agree here.
Well, I mean, you and I agree and disagree, but I think where we agree is there has been a bit of maybe conflation is the right word with account takeovers and the rest of the body of malicious open source that is out there. And a lot of the tips that people are talking about, which to be clear, these are all good things to do, version pinning, cooldown periods. Yes, you should do them. And they're not going to protect you against 100% of the malicious open source that's out there. I mean, if you think about these protections as a Venn diagram with like 20 circles and, all the malware is in the middle, they're each touching an edge of the body of malware. Just as a little spoiler, I've been looking at data from OpenSourceMalware on the packages that have been added to the database in the last 3 months. And Paul, this is not going to surprise you. It continues to be overwhelmingly the volume of malware that's in there is novel. It's not account takeovers. Now, that said, account takeovers are absolutely escalating. Most of what we're seeing for account takeovers is Team PCP. And it's interesting because Lazarus Group, North Korea's professional malware factory, they continue to stay a bit more focused on these contagious interview type attacks that are targeting individual developers, whereas Team PCP is going this account takeover route. And so it's getting a lot of attention. Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with that other than, yes, do these things, but understand the edges, right?
100%. And I'm glad you brought this up because we hadn't talked about this before the show, but like, this is something I was thinking about this morning. Like, I want to create this graphic that shows like, you're in the fort, you're in Winterfell and you're preparing to be attacked. And it's one giant thing, right? And it's throwing bricks and it's got high impact. If it throws one of those bricks and it hits the wall of Winterfell, it makes a big hole. It's got big impact, but you only see one of those. Well, we used to only see one of those per quarter or per month or whatever. And yes, we're seeing more of them now, but still the
rest are what? Arrows.
Well, but then what you have is this. Meanwhile, take the big, huge monster that comes once a month out of the way. And meanwhile, what you have is you just have thousands of individuals coming at your walls 24/7, 365. And if they find a hole in, they are just as powerful and successful for your organization as the big ones. And, I'm not trying to, they're two different risks, right? And, you bringing that up, I really wish the industry spent more time focusing on this constant onslaught of net new packages, which are successful. So a good example of this morning, I saw there's 9 packages by this NPM account. They're still up. And they, in the package.json, they pull a Python payload, and that Python payload is very similar to, the Team PCP info stealer, steals a bunch of stuff. Now, here's the thing is the names of all these things are like Ether's address, and like they're so simplistic around the Ether's kind of crypto stuff that those are going to be the name of some people's internal packages, right? So, and I'm trying to and the bad guy has unpublished the packages themselves. NPM is not taking them off, right? The bad guys unpublished some of these packages, so you can't get download stats and stuff out of them. And this is what's happening constantly. They only got to be successful for 2 or 3 of these like crypto organizations to steal the money. And to that point, DPRK, that doesn't do these big account takeover style things, stole $2 billion last year. I can guarantee you that Team PCP is not going to steal a tenth of that with all these big attacks, right? So we have to kind of put that into context.
Before we come back to Team PCP, I want to talk briefly about the evolutions that we're seeing, the innovations that we're seeing, because this is, I'm not sure what the right, metaphor is here, but defenders get better and threat actors shift to doing something else. And some of the things that we're seeing them do include, with an account takeover, perhaps the main package they take over doesn't actually have the malware in it. That's what we saw with Axios. It's in a transitive dependency. We're going to be seeing that more, undoubtedly. And that's going to be harder for people to catch because you're less likely to be scanning the transitive dependencies being called by your primary dependencies. We're seeing, what were you just talking about? I totally got focused on that. What else are we seeing in terms of evolutions?
The tasks, the VS Code and the Claude.
Yeah, VS Code tasks. We saw that hop campaign types. So Lazarus Group came up with the tasks .json auto execute, which works very similar to the NPM lifecycle script stuff. We saw Team PCP borrow that recently. That helps them with persistence.
Glassworm used it. I mean, like everybody's using it now, right? And Microsoft made a big deal of like fixing the auto. They're basically turning it off by default. But the reality is that lots of people download the new version of it that doesn't have it turned on by default and then immediately turn it on. Or they just upgrade because they've been using VS Code for years and their existing config then turns it on as soon as they get the new version. It's so successful, even after Microsoft fixed it, that everybody is using it now. And the .claude files thing, those packages I was talking about, they drop files into .claude, the hidden .claude directory. And nobody was doing this 2 months ago.
Yeah, it's moving incredibly fast. I don't think you said it out loud, but you kind of alluded to it with the Canvas stuff. This is why data sharing within trust groups is so important. We have our 100%. Own sources. There's no way we're keeping up with this if we're not collecting together. But let's go back to Team PCP. There's 2 more things on the Team PCP. No, more than 2. Geofencing. Geofencing has come up as something that people think is like significant with the latest Team PCP attack. Paul disagrees. Lay it on us, Paul.
Well, yeah, it's confusing because in that interview I was talking about earlier with DMT or whoever it is that was being interviewed, they specifically say they were asked by the interviewer, hey, it looks like you guys have put the CIS, geofencing. So the CIS countries are the kind of Russian friendly group of nations. It's Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan, and some of the others. Sorry, I don't have all of them memorized off the top of my head, but and this is a common thing you see in Russian malware where it checks to see if the location and environments are set up for this.
But we saw this with the maybe poorly labeled but glassworm stuff back in February or so, right? We saw an attack that we loosely attributed to Russian actors based on some geofencing.
Correct. And so a lot of people saw this and that it was asked in the interview. And then the person being interviewed, the part of Team PCP, said, well, we're a big crew and they're not a big crew. Some of our people live in places where we put that in. And I immediately, I just smelled it. I was like, that's bullshit, right? That's not true. Sorry, it's not true. Because
why do you think they're doing it?
Well, it's funny. I saw one of my friends post. He thinks it's just them going to Claude or whatever agent of choice they're using and saying, hey, build me malware. Don't make any mistakes. And so it's just pulling in the CIS stuff as part of it. It just wound up in there. Or something. As a best practice. Like if you operate anywhere close to Russia, just put this in by definition. And Claude's just assuming they're Russian or Russian aligned. So I think that could be very true. It's also interesting that in the interview, they specifically, said they put that in themselves. So who knows what the truth is.
Well, and you mentioned in our previous conversation about the typos that you're seeing in the payloads. There's evidence of 2 things going on with Team PCP. One, they're clearly using AI.
Yep.
They're moving really fast.
They say that explicitly. They say that themselves. They're using AI.
And they're being mentored. So there's 2 things that are coming together that's helping them be faster. And sometimes you end up with tells through AI that don't actually mean what you think they mean.
100%. I think all vibe coding, whether it's legitimate vibe coding that we're seeing increasingly, or bad malicious vibe coding or vibe hacking, what's happening is you're building on your laptop and you're pushing directly to prod, basically, right? And so because of that, you missed the kind of staging checks that you had in typical kind of CI, continuous integration processes that find these things and then don't then stop them, right? This is not happening, and so we're seeing a lot of these payloads either don't go boom, right, because they messed up and typoed something.
Yeah, they should have somebody doing PR review for them, right?
Right, 100%. Well, they're probably using Claude too as well, right? Do not put Claude in your, for God's sakes, do not put Claude in your, because there's attacks on Claude in your CI. But anyhow, yeah, so I mean, I think that's really ultimately what it comes down to, Jen, is that they're vibe coding and they're pushing quickly, they're iterating quickly, and it misses stuff.
Yep. So the place that we want to wrap up on Team PCP is around them open sourcing their worm and some observations that we have about the interview that somebody gave. And again, these people like attention. These are both attention grabbing mechanisms, but open sourcing their worm also will make attribution more difficult in the future.
This chasing clout thing has got them done. And I know they meant, this interview, they mentioned that specifically. They're asked, are you worried about getting popped? And they say, well, this could be a life-changing event or a life-ending event or something like that. But I don't think it's really kind of computed, because these people are pretty young and they, probably really bad things have never happened to them. But I'm making some assumptions here. But the reality is that by open sourcing that, every OSINT forensic detective in the world is going to be looking at that source code and finding little tells, right? Things like the .gitignore file, Mac OS specifically, all kinds of little things like that. These 2 GitHub repos that they use to push these compromised GitHub repos, that GitHub and everybody else has got telemetry they're looking at, right? And so every time you put one of these things out there, every time you do one of these interviews, and at the end of this interview, the person being interviewed says, yeah, I put out false intel all the time after presenting an interview, which is pretty candid, right? So it's like, all right, was the whole interview a false flag? I don't think so. So I guess what I wanted to say is Team PCP, I'm certainly not a supporter. What you're doing is wrong and illegal, but like, you are hastening your demise, your eventual capture with all this stuff. And I know you've heard that from other people, but like, straight up, like, I don't know why you're doing all these interviews and publishing all this stuff, because it's just going to hasten your capture. And trust me, prison sucks. It sucks. Regardless of what country you're in, it still sucks. And that's in your future.
Hopefully they listen.
Too late now, man.
I know, the cat's out of the bag. Pun intended, they like cats.
They do.
They do.
Well done. I hadn't noticed that until you had to remind me. The pun was not obvious to me. Haven't had enough coffee.
Put that cat back. Okay. Anything else you want to hit on?
The cat has bolted from the
We're still on cats.
No, I mean, I think the source code, is interesting. I've looked at it, I've analyzed it. A lot of people have, and some people, when I posted about it on LinkedIn, said there's nothing special about it. And that's not the point, right? The point is that the source code itself now is mostly not important, because, AI can just generate, you can just say, here's the things, you say in natural language, and it goes and builds those. So the actual specific things. And so GitHub removing it from GitHub is kind of silly, because, somebody just can generate a new version of it. But I think it's important to take a look at it and understand, are there things there behaviorally that we can detect and do? And that's one of the things that I'm spending some time on.
What do you think we need to be doing as an industry outside of defenders and threat hunters? Because we have a set of tools out there that are clearly making this easier for everyone from Team PCP to Lazarus Group to threat actors that we don't even know who they are yet, because they're doing a good job of staying hidden. Again, going back into the data that I've been looking at, something like 78% of the packages we added to the database in the last quarter, we have no attribution. So think about that. It's a small percentage that we know where it's coming from a definitive stance. But anyway, the SCMs, the infrastructure providers, the AI model providers. What do you think needs to happen, Paul? Wave your magic wand.
Oh man, there's so many. That's like such an open-ended thing. The first is that we do, like, in this era of vibe coding, we need to double down. Like, all right, so in this time where like magic happens all around us because of AI, we need to fall back to these earlier principles. So I think it's kind of ironic that part of the solution here is us falling back to these like 90s era and 2000s era things like isolation and DMZs and, like, you know, in separation networking, all these simplistic things that actually, you know, provide some actual protection now. The making sure that when you're using CI at every stage that you're checking the packages and the components that you're using. It's not just packages, it's GitHub repos and stuff like that against some sort of
Well,
threat.
also make sure
OSM.
you're using CI, right? I mean, we've seen.
Well, that was my
some of the
point.
vibe
That was my
coding
first
stuff
point.
is
Yeah.
completely not doing it.
100%. Yeah, I mean, vibe coding is naturally does not, you know, it doesn't work well with CI the way it's built. You know, you use Lovable or use any of these tools, it's not built to work with genuine CI. Like, you know, like creating a secondary database for test and staging, you know, is difficult to do in these platforms, so people just don't do it. But yeah, I mean, back to my point about the, you know, staging and stuff like that, is like use something like the OSM threat feed to verify that these packages or these GitHub repos or whatever it is you're trying to pull aren't known bad, and do that everywhere. Do that on your developer's laptop, do that on CI, do it everywhere. Because that, you know, we just have to fall back to these kind of, you know, earlier, more what might be seen as more simplistic controls, but
we know
they have power
work.
now.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot more I could say about that, but we'll leave that for a special edition episode.
Special rant.
You and I both need to get going. I need to go to B-Sides Melbourne, and your head.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get together for dinner with some of the folks that are here at the Clutch event. And actually, as we were talking, I was getting text messages from my son and my husband. My son's track team won their relay race, so I gotta go check in with them and hear about the relay. Anyway, awesome. Hope everyone has a good week. Oh, what?
One last thing, I just got the notice that Instructure paid the ransom, so ShinyHunters has removed the data and it's not going to get out there. So, you know, Australian government and Instructure and all you can continue to pretend like you can keep this undercover, right? The class action lawsuit is coming for all y'all.
And on that note, mic drop. We're out.
Boom. Bam.
Boom. All right. Later.
See ya.